All right. So in today's video, we have Eric Finkel, who works as the VP of Product and AI at Prophia. And with him, we will discuss about all the challenges and difficulties with the product development and engineering in the space of AI. With that, I would like to welcome Eric. And yeah, why don't you just introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. I appreciate you bringing me on. Obviously, Ashish, we've had a good time working together at Spectrum Labs back in the day, and yeah, it's good to catch up and yeah, see what you're up to. Yeah. So my name is Eric Finkel. As Ashish mentioned, VP Product and AI at Prophia. And so Prophia is a commercial real estate prop tech company. And so our clients are basically these commercial real estate firms that need to manage large portfolios of buildings and tenants. And with those portfolios come a large data set of lease documents. And so we help them manage these portfolios by building this portfolio management software that is AI enabled, and we do all the extraction of important information from these documents so that they can more easily digest them and sort of see patterns over time, use that data in downstream models. And sort of understand potentially the value of their buildings and the revenue that they could be collecting over time and that sort of thing. And so yeah, my team, the product and AI teams, we obviously define the requirements for future enhancements to the product, and then we also do all the AI sort of back end work that does the extraction and sort of additional kind of AI features on top of that. And so, yeah, this is a little bit of background of the company that I come from. The sort of how I found my way into where I'm at is a little bit of a winding road. So I actually was in a neuroscience lab. I guess I don't know, more than 5 or 6 years ago. I graduated with a PhD in neuroscience from Johns Hopkins, and in that program did a lot of data analysis and a little bit of machine learning. Figured out pretty quickly that I didn't want to be a professor, and so I didn't go down the academic track, and instead basically self-taught ML back in the day, and basically for about 2 years was just in my spare time, before going into the lab and after coming back from the lab, just doing things like watching Andrew Ng's ML classes on Coursera, doing Kaggle competitions, doing personal projects, and right after graduating, found my way into an internship at Capital One as a data scientist, and then started working in startups shortly after that. Yeah, and so I'll kind of pause there for a second since I've been kind of rambling for a little bit, but yeah, just winding road from neuroscience into data science, and now find myself in a startup in sort of leadership, and so that's kind of the bookends of my career so far.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually very helpful, because I think whoever is going to take a look at this video, they would know that they can come from like any background and they can sort of learn ML data science, and whatever they want to do, they should be, because the space is just so big.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
I think one of the things that I would like to know, because I know you from where we worked earlier at Spectrum Labs, so I know you as a data scientist and a hands-on engineer. But in your new role, as in the leadership of product and AI, I would like to talk a bit more about that. And I think before that, like, I just want to have I have a very basic question, which is for the viewers to know. Can you tell us the difference between like the product development and the engineering, especially the AI space?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things there. So to answer the kind of last question there, so the definitely a big meaty one, so we can have follow up Q&A about it. But So, I work at a startup, and so it's a little bit different than, say, working in product in a big company, and working in AI at a big company. Those are probably a lot more uh, separate and distinct, right? If you're at a big company, at a startup, things are really mashed together in a lot of ways. It's honestly the beauty of working at a startup. One of the things that attract me to working at a startup is just being able to wear all these hats, and kind of, if I just am interested in picking up skills, I can just, do it, and no one's going to ask questions. And so it's great. And so, even when I was kind of more technically, in the AI part of the company at Prophia, I was still kind of doing some product stuff. So I would interact a lot with the PMs. I would, they would ask me, they, for example, might not have a ton of AI experience or working with AI features. And so I would end up filling in a lot of that, that space to try and define requirements for the AI features that we were building, and work with them. And so, actually going into product wasn't such a big jump anymore because I had interacted with them a lot. But we're just sort of broadly, and for people that might not know, I mean, so like product. So at Prophia we have a software as a service web app that is, and then obviously a lot of backend AI stuff. And so product, a lot of what product does is going to be about building the web app. And then but we have AI features that are infused in there, right? And so a PM, so someone on my team, so a PM that reports to me will basically we might have we might know that we need to improve on the product in a certain way. Say, we want to add a AI chatbot to our platform, right? Or an AI agent. And so they, because this is something that customers might want, or this is something that we know is going to kind of unlock part of the market for us, right? And so there might be some kind of either top down or bottom up kind of reason for initially starting this. And then their role is then to go out and interview customers to understand, what problems this would solve, if there are any problems that need to be solved by this, or are we just kind of barking up the wrong tree, right? So a little bit of validation there. And then, kind of as they learn more, kind of dig deeper and deeper to understand, okay, what are the specific requirements? Like, what parts of the app does the AI agents need to have access to? Like, what parts of what information needs to be accessed by this AI agent? What are the risks involved? Like, we don't want sort of, the AI agent to pull data from another account, right? And so we need to make sure that we define that, the requirement has to be that it is user management has to be a very big part of that. And then once they kind of, build a picture of what the product looks like, without really understanding, or without really kind of going into the back end and AI implementation, they kind of build that story. They then bring it around to the relevant stakeholders of the company, so engineering, AI, and then we essentially start working together to understand, like, okay, how does AI fit into this? How does the back end fit into this? Like, what are the things that the engineering needs to be tracking as we start implementing this, and what do they need to implement? And then same thing with AI. And so then that's sort of how things get rolling. And then so an AI engineer, right, from that is then going to essentially get requests for, okay, we're building an AI chatbot. It's going to look like this. It's going to have this set of information that it has access to. So I need to figure out, like, I need to write a engineering requirements document, right? Of like determining, like, given these product requirements, this is how I would need to implement the AI in order to fulfill those needs. And then they go through basically a couple of sprints of implementing it. Okay, so I'll stop there. There's a lot of kind of complexity there, and so we can dive in wherever you think is necessary.
No, I think again, like that's very helpful, because I think you sort of touched upon already a few questions that I had. So I think I would just pivot towards your leadership role.
Okay, yeah.
So it's obviously Definitely, since you're working at a startup, I know there's a lot of, moving parts here and there. I just want to briefly touch upon, is there a difference between, the leadership role that you
Yeah.
currently have, or you are still like pretty much hands-on on
Yeah.
like all of these things?
Yeah, it's great question. So, so just to go back a little bit, actually, before I joined Spectrum, where I worked with you, and you mentioned I was, an IC,
Mhm.
individual contributor at Spectrum, but actually before that, I was already doing like director level stuff at Prophia. So I kind of boomeranged. I was at Prophia first, went to Spectrum, went to a different company after that, and then came back to Prophia. But when I was at Prophia, I was actually kind of, I mean, we were a tiny company at the time. So it was like, really, I was like kind of founding AI engineer, but everyone would, as far as AI strategy went, like I was kind of the go-to person.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, so even though, and so we're still a small company, we're not a massive company, right? So we're still a small startup. And so my role, even though I am involved in leadership, I actually do still, implement, and contribute individually as well. It's just a smaller percentage than obviously when I was at Spectrum. And so Spectrum was 100% IC, essentially. And then right now I probably put myself at like 30% individual contributor, and then the rest of it is basically I'm managing the AI engineers on my team, and then the product folks on my other team, basically. So I have a PM and a UX designer that I manage as well. But so it's again part of the reason why I like working at a startup is I can be involved in everything. I will go to a leadership team meeting and talk about like what is the strategy and business strategy of the company and like what we need to be doing, and I will have my voice heard there, and I will definitely push for certain things. But then I will then take that and turn that into product requirements at some points, right? And then that will then feed into like what I actually implement in the AI side as well, or what I manage my AI engineers to implement on the AI side, right? And so I touch a whole bunch of things in the company, and it's part of the fun in my book. So yeah.
Right. And I think that's like a very, unique sort of experience because you are touching upon every part of the organization. And I think the whole sort of product development, you right from the requirements to ultimately building out the product. And I think that's like a very great experience in general.
Yeah. Yep.
So while we're talking about leadership,
Mhm.
um, I want to know, how do you measure your, sort of return on investment in AI? So,
Mhm.
obviously, you are an AI first company and you want to, uh, you must have come to a point where you must have thought about, okay, whether we should buy this, AI tool from outside or whether we, build something in-house. So how do you think about that return on investment when you're scoping out features that you want to implement?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a harder question than it sounds, because the pace at which AI is moving it's so hard to keep up. Like um, so our CEO really wanted the company to be fully AI enabled, not even just in the product, right? But like even the different teams, how they work. He wanted everyone to be AI forward, right?
Mhm.
And we had chat a OpenAI Teams account, right, where everyone had an AI account and you could collaborate and stuff like that. And so it was a little bit, so we definitely had this top-down pressure of trying to invest in AI and use AI in our everyday, from the salespeople to the operations teams to the AI engineers, obviously. And I think there's a little bit of honestly, I think that that's a tough needle to thread, because a lot of people are going to be a little bit hesitant to start with, and then also if there's this top-down pressure, it feels like you're being forced to do something that where you don't feel like you need to do something. And so I part of my role as in the organization is like, well, I'm the AI guy, and so I have to like influence people to pick it up and that sort of thing. And so I'm honestly still trying to figure that out, but I will tell you what we've done so far. So that I I actually prefer, at least for now, Anthropic. And so we, on the AI side, do a lot of work using Claude Code. So we'll, get code assistance right from Claude Code, with a little bit of Cursor as well. And so that's been great. We've been really like cranking the chain on that, and just it's obviously coming from an AI team. Like everyone's kind of bought in from the start, for the most part. And but then my other side of my team is more product folks, and so they've kind of used this sort of off the shelf kind of chat PRD, or Figma Make, or these kind of tools that are come from the product side but are now AI enabled, right? uh,
Mm-hmm.
but and so they've kind of played around with it, but nothing has really like, you know nothing's really kind of hit home too much, like. And so but what we're starting to do is actually take Claude Code and actually start using it in the product folks workflows. And so there's a ton that you can do in Claude Code, even though it's called Claude Code, that is not actually about code at all. Like you could generate PRDs, brainstorm, think through problems, come up with skills and workflows that help essentially optimize or make things more efficient. And so we have this kind of internal GitHub repo that's Prophia Claude, basically, which is just all these markdown files and skills and MCPs that are really useful in our day to day, both on the AI side and on the product side. And we're seeing like pretty good adoption of that, where you can start to contribute to that repo from the product side and feel kind of invested and kind of form it into your workflow rather than have it being forced on you.
Mm.
So I found that is actually a way better way to encourage people to use AI. And we're seeing, I mean, nothing quantitative, but qualitatively, we're seeing a lot of like productivity gains in terms of on the product side, just having MCPs to Confluence to automatically upload our PRDs and automatically create Jira tickets that then that Claude can then move across the board and stuff like that. Like just amazing, like yeah, quality of life type things is what we're building into this thing, and so it's great. But so as far as investment goes, I think especially on the AI side, it's just been like obvious how impactful AI has been. Like, and I know I don't know. I want to know what your opinion on this, but there's a lot of talk about like, oh, like by 2026, 80% of code is going to be written by AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
I see that today. Like I've seen that months ago. I don't write a bunch of a lot of code anymore. I honestly don't. Like everything is just through Claude, to the point where Claude went down one morning and I had no idea. Like I felt very anxious. I didn't know what to do. Like obviously I could, it would like it, if I really forced myself, I could easily get back on the bike here. But like, I was, for a moment, I was like, oh man, it's going to be so much harder to do what I wanted to do today because Claude is not running right now. Thankfully, it was like an hour later, it went back up, and I was like, great. But yeah, so I'm actually curious at some point if you want to tell me about how impactful AI has been in your workflow. I'd be interested to hear.
Sure. Yeah, I think I can briefly just touch upon that. I'm sure, like, there, as you said, I feel like there are almost like every engineer in some sense or other like
Yep.
uses code assistants. I also use like some version of that, but I feel like I think I read an article the other day where I think it was a post from somebody, and he said that um, it doesn't really matter too much, if you're using AI code assistants to, write your code. It's kind of like you can think of them as like a junior engineer in your company working, and writing code for you. But it is still your responsibility what goes into your repos and your PRs, because you can't just put anything in there.
For sure.
So like somebody needs to be sort of responsible for that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think that really sort of hits home, because I feel like, yeah, that's true. Like you can use code assistants as something as an helping hand,
Mm.
but ultimately if the way you are writing and pushing code is you're not looking at what code assistants are outputting, then I feel like it creates a lot of problems. But if you're
Yeah.
just using it as a helping tool, I think it's fine. So that's like my opinion on that.
Interesting. So I have a little bit of a hot take on this. And this I might look back in like 6 months and be like, and just kind of like face palm and like, oh man, like I was so lost and naive. But um so I've been thinking about this a lot because it has really taken over my day to day, honestly. Coding with AI. And I've started to like really form this opinion that um, you either have to be in it or out, right? You can't 50-50 do it. You know, you can. I think there's a place for like, if you're a really senior engineer and you just know that you're all automatically going to be more productive for the most part by yourself and with a little bit of code assistance. Like I think that definitely works, right? For sure.
Mhm.
Um, I don't think you can be 50-50 where you're kind of doing like half of the code writing and Claude is doing half of the code writing. Like I think um, at that point you have to essentially go in with both feet. Yeah, you have to jump in because like the you basically just have to like accept the anxiety of not knowing as deeply what's in the code base as you might have if you wrote it 100% yourself. And once you get over that hump and put all the right checks in place so that you don't do something stupid, then I think it actually is a really great way to work, and it really like opens up doors, and the productivity gains just shoot through the roof. Um so I have a whole like way of doing things these days. I'm sure we can get into if you want, but to talk about a lot of those kind of like checks that you put in, like not just like things like integration tests or unit tests or anything like that. There's a whole like workflow that I think people are likely going to, if not already, start to develop in order to make sure that you don't get that kind of like experience of, oh no, Claude erased a third of my code base, right? And like I
Right.
have to like roll it back and then fix all the bugs and stuff like that. And which you end up seeing a lot of the people complain about when they talk about yeah, code assistance basically. But
Right. No, I get that, and I think that's a very sort of valuable opinion. If you're
yeah,
seeing a jump in productivity at Prophia when you're using cloud code, integrating cloud code in these different things, I think um, that's a valid point. Yeah, I think that makes sense from your perspective, and I think it also sort of touches upon the question that I wanted to sort of ask. I think you already touched upon a few things, but if you want to elaborate on that,
yeah,
my question was going to be, in what verticals you are using AI within the company. I know you already touched upon, you're using it as code assistants,
yeah,
using it to generate PRDs, moving the Jira tickets.
yeah,
Are there like any other things, maybe in infrastructure side, that you're using AI, or maybe the AI agents or MCP? Since you're using cloud code, I'm thinking maybe you're using MCP and AI agents as well.
yeah.
So if you want to touch upon that, and maybe you want to touch upon the checks and balances.
Yeah, for sure. So as far as yeah, so one of the other things that kind of comes to mind there is that we have some sort of AI observability tools called LangFuse
Mhm.
that we use, and obviously we have Postgres databases and and Figma, so all these different tools that people are used to in other contexts, but you can build MCPs into them and or around them, and as a result, leverage them in different ways. And so, and the Jira tickets is one example of that. But so our PMs and myself as well, like if we want to know sort of product, there's a lot of situations where normally we would query the database and try and find essentially like patterns in user behavior that we could then build off of, or that would teach us something about how to improve the product or for a future enhancement or something like that. And so it would be usually the way that would happen would be a PM who might know a little bit of SQL but not enough to like really get into the database, would then have to either go to an engineer or to a data scientist and be like, hey, like I need to know these things, right? And can you pull this data for me so that we can figure this out? Or if they have a A/B test, they would have to then pull the data from that A/B test and then do the analysis, and have to kind of work hand in hand with the data scientists for that. Now they don't have to do that. Now they basically use Cloud Code with an MCP that pulls from our read-only version of our data set, or of our database, and they pull the data, and then they can just ask Claude to do a certain analysis for them, right? And it will just do it for them, and they will know immediately, and they will have never needed to actually talk to a data scientist in order to do that. And so the amount of time that it takes them to get to an answer is just so much faster. And also there's certain cases where I know people will not ask certain questions of a data scientist because they may have overloaded that data scientist, and they don't want to like overload them anymore, right? And so they just kind of leave out certain experiments or certain analyses, and now they don't have to do that. Now they can explore every nook and cranny of the data without having that sort of friction, right? And so there's that. I would say Figma, the same thing, right? So you can pull the design system that might be in Figma in order to then take that and upload that into a prototyping tool like Lovable, or UX, what is it called? Yeah, there's another AI design tool there, but you can put that into a prompt and then have a prototyping tool just build out a prototype that then the UX designer can use in an interview to kind of collect information, right? And so there are all these things that kind of AI has unlocked for us that like would just take weeks to do otherwise, right? Hopefully I answered your question, because I've been kind of all over the place, but
No, I think you definitely answered the question, and I did catch one thing which you mentioned. Your the people who use AI agents to basically read data from your read-only database, and I think that's one of the checks and balances, right? You have set your database in such a way that it's just read-only; they cannot write on top of it, right? That's and all of this, I'm guessing, is being done through AI agents, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so it's Cloud Code is an AI agent, right? And Gemini, CLI, and Codex, all these things, right? You can give them tools to access all of these things, right? And and then build workflows for them to do these to access these tools that kind of expands the usability or the feature set that they provide. So yeah.
So do you see like any so far, have you seen any limitations or risks around AI agents specifically?
Like in so there's I think there's kind of two like kinds of or sides to that question, right? So you could be asking me about using AI agents internally for our kind of day-to-day work, or using AI agents in production in our the ones that we deploy. So which would you like to hear about?
Both. Let's touch upon both.
So I think I would say the production one it's clear that the issues there, because I would say everyone wants an AI agent, and people on the commercial side might hear from a customer like, oh, like, why don't you guys build an AI agent for this? And then they will come to us and be like, why don't you guys build an AI agent for this? And a lot of the times it does not need an AI agent, right? Like, and so a lot of the times it's just things that could be solved not even with AI at all, right? and so there's a lot of drawbacks. Like a lot of people will build AI agents and put them into production, and then they will realize post hoc, like, hey, it's actually more annoying to use an AI agent for this than to use some other kind of more basic tool, right? And so I think that that's definitely one big downside, one thing that you have to like push back on and keep an eye out for, because like agents are just such a buzzword that people just throw it out there without even really understanding what they think it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, so there's that, I would say. And then there's AI agents in general are they are they're kind of they fit a whole bunch of useful situations, but they definitely do not fit a whole bunch of other situations. And so even kind of going into kind of more traditional machine learning models, right? Like there are definitely cases where you would prefer just to put a machine learning model and have a just do kind of like API requests for that specific thing, than kind of building a whole AI agent. Because the downside to AI agents is usually that they are less deterministic, right? So you might ask a question multiple times of that agent, and it will come back with slightly or sometimes very different answers to the same question. And they tend to be a lot slower, right? So like you could get a response from a machine learning model in milliseconds when an AI agent might take minutes, like literally minutes. And so there are situations where it's just bad user experience to put an AI agent in there when you could use a not even a deep learning model, a more traditional machine learning model. So yeah, okay, so that's the production level side. I'd say it's not as clear to me. I think most of the benefit, like we've just seen so many benefits on sort of the day-to-day usage internally from these things that okay, so I mean, the one thing you'll want to do is make sure that you might get an answer, and this kind of goes back to the other example, where you might get an answer from say you're using an agent that has a SQL MCP, or that can then pull data from your from your database. It might give you an answer, and it might sound very confident in that answer, and it might not have hallucinated at all, right? It might have actually pulled real data, but it used some logic that you can even peek into, right, in the reasoning, that's just flawed, right? And it will present a very nice, maybe even a table to you of like what the answer to your question is, but in reality, like it's a flawed answer. And so you'll need to not just accept things wholesale, and actually make sure and double check that the answers that you're getting make sense to you logically. And and because you're getting all these efficiency gains, right? You don't have to actually write the SQL code and all this stuff. You can actually spend time actually evaluating whether the answers that you're getting are correct or not, right? And so I would maybe not take the efficiency gains wholesale. I would say maybe take those efficiency gains and use some of that to make sure that the answers that you're getting are correct, right?
So it sounds like what you're saying is that AI agents are good as long as, I think it's probably like coming back to the same thing that we were discussing earlier. Like as a human, you need to sort of also make sure what you're getting is actually correct.
Right,
And
right.
basically the justification is the AI agents makes your work, so quick that you have the time to actually, think deeply about, what you're getting.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, actually, and you mentioned this, something along these lines, it does kind of mirror, assigning a ticket to a junior engineer, right? Like they do the task that's defined in that ticket. That might have been something that you could have done yourself, but you might be busy with something else, and so it's good to delegate it to a more junior engineer. They come back with the answer, but you're still checking the code, right? You're still going to go through the logic of the PR, right? And make sure that it actually makes sense before you actually just accept it. You're not just accepting the answer from the junior engineer, right? You still you still need to double check. And so I would say it's like that, right? You want to always double check the answers.
Yeah. All right, that makes sense. All right. So yeah, let's shift gears a bit because what I really wanted to get into is, for somebody who wants to like transition into the field of AI at this point,
Yeah,
and I know that you at Prophia are sort of like always hiring AI engineers.
yeah.
So I'd like to know from you, what are the things that you are looking for at this point? We are towards the end of 2025. So what
Mhm.
are the things that you are looking for specifically in an AI engineer? What should a good AI portfolio, according to you, looks like?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's actually a pretty tough question, and we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording. But things are moving so fast that there are a lot of skills that a ML engineer, right, or a data scientist, right, might have that are actually not as relevant anymore as they used to be, right? Like we don't fiddle around with hyperparameters to train models, anymore, right? I mean, we might change the temperature or something like that in an API call, but like, we're not playing with learning rates and like, learning schedules and all this stuff anymore. And so there's a lot of stuff that almost seems like, you know, you would imagine just kind of superficially like, oh, an ML engineer is going to be the perfect kind of person to hire as an AI engineer. That's not necessarily true, actually. You might want to hire someone that's just a back-end developer. I'm not just back-end developers are very valuable.
Hmm.
But they're not, it's not as obvious to a layperson that a back-end engineer would be a good person to to hire as an AI engineer. But in fact, they are, right? And not a lot of people have tons of experience building around these APIs and using LangGraph or whatever the most recent tools are for AI engineers, because this stuff is so brand new. And some of those things, even like LangChain, right? LangChain used to be kind of like you would see AI engineer job ads that were like, oh, LangChain, LangChain, LangChain. Like LangChain is like basically not a ton of people use it anymore. They instead use LangGraph or Pydantic or whatever.
Mhm.
And so things just have changed so fast. Even more so than what you would normally expect in other tech fields, right? So anyway, so the I would say it's actually a great time to go into AI engineering because the amount of things that you have to learn, like the tool set, is pretty small because it's just changing all the time, right? And so you just learn the things that are over the past few months have been like really important, right? You learn those and use them in maybe your current job or in a personal project, and that will definitely help you. It's not as as hard as before, where you would have to like really dig into years of best practices and tools and like theory and all this stuff. It's all very like manageable now, I would say. um but it actually makes hiring very difficult because there's not a ton of people with the quote unquote like right experience. And we're actually starting to pivot a little bit, and I'm actually going back to into my like network of people to try and find people that want to transition into AI that might not have the right tools, but I know they're smart and hardworking people that can learn really quickly. And those are the type of people I would say I'm looking for, people that you can see they have a pattern of learning things really quickly, and then trying to bring that out in interviews, because that is the kind of place that we're in right now, where you basically just have to constantly be learning things. And that's really the only indicator I think of success at this point. Yeah.
Right. So basically, you're not going to asking, traditional ML questions or deep learning questions, anymore.
So we do still do a little bit of traditional ML, right? Like not as much as we used to, but it's maybe like 15% of, an AI engineer job now. And so like I think it's helpful to have that on your resume. I don't think it's as required. It definitely is not as required as it used to be, right? And so, yeah, and so for me, I honestly I think how we interview for an AI engineer is really kind of in flux right now, and it's really about like problem solving stuff. I don't want to say leak code, like I mean, like we'll ask questions that are more kind of relevant to what we're doing, right? And trying to understand sort of how people think about problems and break down problems rather than, yeah, leak code questions, which, have their place. But like, I tend to prefer just kind of, seeing how someone thinks, and it's almost a little bit, like not ad hoc, but more like spur of the moment kind of like follow-up questions. And here's the problem, tell me how you would solve it. And then, try and poke holes in their reasoning and kind of this back and forth, which, I'm sure a lot of people are used to in other contexts. But that's kind of what the only thing that I found that is a useful way to interview people these days, unfortunately.
Right. All right. So pivoting like from AI engineering, I also wanted to touch upon the AI product management, because I know a couple of folks who are curious about going from like they're doing backend software development, but maybe want to pivot into the product management as such.
Mhm.
So can you touch upon like what are the kinds of skills they would need to if they want to transition into the product management side of AI?
Yeah, I mean specifically AI or like just generally.
In general, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think we can talk about it in general, and then maybe I'll add a little bit to, tie it specifically to the AI side. But yeah, I mean, I think, product managers, to me, like the kind of most talented product managers that I've worked with, they basically have this kind of like end-to-end ownership of a feature or a product or thing they're working on, right? They will come up with the requirements. They will try and problem solve and figure out like what are the requirements by interviewing people and not being shy and reaching out to people internally if those are the stakeholders, or reaching out to customers, even cold calling folks. You have to have that kind of like I'd say yeah, grit and sort of like hustle almost in order to like do that requirement gathering step. And it's a lot of like juggling different types of interactions and work, right? And then taking that and synthesizing it down into something that is a solution to that problem, while making sure that you are understanding like how important it is, but also how much of a lift it's going to be, right? So that's the kind of bread and butter of a PM, is like making sure that not only is this thing that is important, but it's also tractable. We have the experience to build it. We have the time and bandwidth to build this thing, and how much of an impact is it going to have, and like how soon is that impact coming. And so it's a lot of like zooming out, and trying to understand the bigger picture, making sure that you're coordinating with all the different stakeholders and teams, and then making sure that thing is built and successful, right? And so you end up also measuring success with metrics after it's deployed, and making sure that was a successful kind of feature to build, right? And so I would say the difference between that and engineering is pretty big. I think it's helpful to have technical experience if you're a PM, because that allows you to better communicate with engineering, and then also understand the technical lift that comes with certain requirements. And so that definitely is very helpful. I'd say the parts that may or may not be stuff that you're going to need to brush up on if you're coming from a technical side is really that like customer interaction, like being able to reach out and understand from a person's perspective what their problem is, not and kind of even read between the lines of like what someone is telling you and what actually is the underlying problem, because that's not always a one-to-one match, right? And so it's a little bit of psychology in there, and then also the juggling like just a bunch of things. I think is not maybe not kind of not that engineers can't do that, but like that I think it might not be as a kind of baseline requirement for engineering, right? So yeah, hopefully that answers the kind of general PM stuff. The AI stuff is interesting because specifically PMing for AI features is interesting because there's so like a lot of the times, especially product designers and PMs, they will have a kind of set of patterns that they know in terms of how to solve problems and like certain requirements, right? They'll kind of have a picture in their head of like, oh, like given this problem, this kind of matches like, oh, we need a back end thing, or we need a this specific type of UX, right? But with AI, there is no like perfect form factor yet, right? Like there's things are so kind of in flux. Like AI chatbots are the thing right now, or like kind of terminal tools, or like interacting with AI through a chat box, right, is kind of like the thing now. But like, does that have to be the thing? Like, could it be more of the AI enabled spreadsheet where every cell is enhanced with AI by like putting in specific prompts for a column or something like that, right? And so those are all like brand new kind of form factors, and so it's not as easy to kind of just match up with previous experience. And it's really about pushing the boundaries and being really creative and thinking outside the box, which I'm sure those patterns will build up over time, but like currently it's definitely something that you have to you have to kind of deal with that you didn't have to before, basically.
Right. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Um, all right, so I think we are like towards the end of our time here. So I just wanted to, touch upon a few last couple of questions.
Yeah.
Um, what's your take on, where is AI engineering going like in the next 2 to 3 years? Like
Yeah.
there are a lot of things, a lot of, hype around it that, we won't need software developers, we won't need, anyone basically writing code, will just get everything done from AI. So I
Yeah.
just want you to understand your take on that.
Yeah, these are the type of questions that I'm sure like any answer that I give you, there's going to be a whole group of people that are going to hate it.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit, I'll just try and be as honest as I can. And this is obviously my own take, right? No one's like, I'm sure there's a very high probability that it's totally wrong. So let me just throw that out there to start. So just seeing the difference in what AI has been able to do over the past year plus, right? Like I mean, I just remember, working with Claude 3.5 and thinking it was like, damn, it's awesome, right? It's like, it can actually write, classes and functions in ways that are just like, actually useful, right? For the first time, actually useful, right? But I still want to write it myself. I still kind of want to write it myself. And like, or I might have to I don't want to like unleash it on my repo, right? Or on my project. I still want to very in a controlled way, aim it at a very specific thing, and then, let it go and constrain it to that thing, and then evaluate it, make sure that it's good, right? To the point where now, like, I will give very high level direction. Well, maybe not. That's quite true. I will go through a whole. My workflow has shifted to the point where I'm like interacting a lot in the sort of like front loaded with AI. So I'm like, kind of brainstorming with the AI, like trying to figure out like pros and cons of different approaches, the implementation, making sure it has the right context. But then once I am satisfied with how well it understands the problem, I will actually let it do a lot. I will let it do almost end-to-end development of the thing that of the solution to a problem. I will
Mm-hmm.
obviously check in on it and make sure that like it's following through with the implementation in the way that it was, I thought it was going to. But for the most part, I'm making much fewer changes, and it's really there for my own like sanity. And then the code that's actually deployed is like 80-90% AI
Yeah.
built. And so if that only happened in a year, like what is going to happen in a year after? Like I people will say, I was on this like panel for actually alumni at Hopkins that are trying to transition in AI from different fields. And there was someone from Google DeepMind there, and someone from another big tech company. And they were saying like, oh, like you always have to really be like in touch with the underlying technology so that you can understand the um the implementation of the model, and that making sure that it's not going off the rails, and really like understanding what's actually being implemented, so that in case you need to pull the brake or whatever, right, you can do it, right? I think that's true now. In a year, I don't know that that's going to be true. Like, I think it could be possible that we're going to get so good that we actually don't even really need to understand that underlying implementation. And it could be that we just put the right checks and balances right in place, where we know that things aren't going to go haywire, like but if you ask the person like, how was this part of the logic actually implemented, maybe they actually don't even need to know that anymore, right? And so that's like that's probably on the riskier side of what people will say, coming from a more technical POV. But like, yeah, I'm optimistic that might actually be the case.
So it sounds like maybe what you're saying is that the prompt engineering is going to be more valuable skill going forward, because if you know what you want and if you can properly convey it,
Yeah.
you're saying that AI might be able to just take it from there.
Yeah. And so there's one point I would like to make, though, is like, so prompt engineering is a interesting term, because it's like it was kind of born in this time where GPT-4, GPT 3.5 turbo or whatever, right? Where it's like, oh, like, yeah, prompt engineering, you're taking this one little paragraph and you're like making sure that it's stated in the exact right way, so that like the model doesn't do something really dumb, right? But like, it's totally different now, where like, I was talking about how I'll spend literally like an hour just going back and forth with the model to like that I basically, I've given sort of instructions on the model to like, okay, when I'm trying to brainstorm something, and it's eventually going to lead to a PRD or an ERD, right? Like, I want you to go through this process, right? I want you to ask me questions, consider the risks, consider the different implementations, the pros and cons of them, make sure that I understand them. And so we just go back and forth on this like for an hour plus, right? And then at the end of that, I say, okay, write an implementation like document, right? Like how you plan on implementing it, right? And so it'll write this whole implementation document. And then I will read through that thing and make sure that I feel that that is a good way of doing things. And so that's a lot of prompt engineering, but it's like, it's on a massive scale, right? It's like, if you counted the number of tokens of me going back and forth with this model, it's like, I'm not even gonna guess, like, yeah, hundreds of thousands of tokens, at least, like, of just going back and forth, and then it writing a whole bunch of things, it reasoning through the stuff, and then telling me what it thinks, right? And then, and at the end of the day, that ends up becoming this implementation document that then can get broken down into tickets. And so prompt engineering was a very different thing a year ago than it is now, and I think it will be even more different like later on. And so, yeah. So to answer the question, I think if you want to call that prompt engineering, like, yes, it's going to be all about prompt engineering at some point.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of like brainstorming with your, you know, colleague or teammate and basically coming up with what you want and then, working from there. So, yeah,
Yep.
definitely.
Yep.
All right. So maybe one last question, which is, I always ask everybody that comes on the show, are there any final piece of advice or any courses or books or blogs or things that you would like to suggest for somebody who is trying to
Yeah.
break into AI field at this point?
Yeah. Um, so I actually don't think courses, books, maybe blogs, are that useful because they might actually be optimizing for something that is no longer important, right? And so I wouldn't, at least for now, say like, oh, like you should totally take this course or you should get a master's in whatever, because those are going to be almost, yeah, I'm pretty positive they're going to be outdated by the time you get through them. So I would just say that the biggest sort of piece of advice is um, dive in with both feet and just try to learn how to use AI in every part of your day, and to the point where like you might force yourself to be using it to start with, but there will be aha moments like throughout the process where you're like, oh, like this actually makes me so much more productive and is actually just a better way of doing it than what I was doing before, right? And so yeah, bottom line is dive in with both feet and don't look back. And there's going to be a little bit of you know anxiety about whether you feel like you're a real engineer or you feel like you're a real uh, technical person, but because the code is being written for you. But I think if the future is going to look like what I think is going to look like those are the people that are going to be the best prepared, or the people that are just willing to dive in with both feet. Um, yeah,
Got it.
yeah,
All right. Thank you so much. And I think this was a really interesting conversation.
yeah, yeah. Had fun.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Yeah, you got me on my soapbox, man. But yeah,
It,
yeah, I appreciate it, Ashish. This is a lot of fun.
Great. So let me stop the recording.